So then with that, let me turn, now I'm changing gears a little bit. What I say now is not necessarily related to what we've talked about, but for both papers, of course, as you're thinking about, I've said it before, right? You want to have a paper that interests you, excites you, and I think both of these topics excite you. The more you can excite others, the better. So I'll just give you a few possibly fatuous thoughts on how to think about that. What makes a good research question? Well, obviously it's got to interest you and it should interest others. So imagine a 2x2. You're interested in this topic, yes or no. Others are interested, yes or no. If you're doing a topic that interests others, but you're not that keen on it, well, then basically you've reduced academia to a job, which, no, we shouldn't be in this business just because it's a job. We should be doing it because it's fun. And so that's not an ideal thing. We often get pulled into that. It's like, I was so bored when I finished my dissertation, but everyone says you should keep publishing out of your dissertation. I ended up choosing not to, but you can imagine it's very seductive to say, I'm sick of this topic. I never want to look at it again. But the thing to do is keep publishing out of it. That's a job. Sometimes you're interested in a topic and others are not. And that's okay, but then that's kind of a hobby because you may never actually get to publish it. So it's fun, but not great. If you're ever doing something where you're not interested in it and nobody else is interested in it either, I don't know what you were thinking. You shouldn't be doing that. But if you can find these topics that you're interested in it and you can get others excited, that's the joy of academia. So a lot of my world is coming up with something I'm interested in and then trying to figure out how to make sure to move it from being a hobby to a joy. And for me, the way you frame the research question can influence others' interest in that. And for me personally, framing things as a puzzle is often more interesting than saying, I'm doing the same thing in a different industry, for example. So just to give you one example of this from my own work, Jackson actually and I did a paper, this goes back more years than I want to admit, where we basically looked at the trucking industry through the lens of transaction cost economics and some other stuff. And, we wrote a paper and there were two ways we could write the introduction. One would have been, there are 500 empirical studies of transaction cost economics, but nobody has applied it to trucking yet. So we're going to do the 500 first study and it's going to be on trucking. I don't think that would have excited, that would have made it a hobby. I don't think that would have excited too many people. But the other way to do it is take the exact same paper. So everything after the first few paragraphs is the same. But the paper we wrote ended up saying, there's something really weird here. If you go back and look at the four major theoretical papers by the four major organizational economics theorists in the world, Williamson, Klein, Crawford, Alchian, Milgram, and Holmstrom in a working paper, and Alchian and Dempsey, they have four different ways of looking at the make versus buy decision, but they all agree that for hire trucking is where you should see, that's the canonical place where you should see buying, where you should see a guy with a truck contracting with folks. More than half of all of the trucking in the US is done by company drivers in company trucks. So how do we make sense of this? The exact same paper from that point onward, but it's very different to write I don't know. I think people seemed excited that way because it's like there's a puzzle that creates tension. And then the paper is like the detective story to release that. So I just sort of leave that with you. I guess the last thing I'll say is, because Jackson talked a little about this on the other day, this is my final slide, Elena, so forgive me if I'm going over just a teeny bit. Let's say that you're doing a paper that relies on data from Chile. This has implications for how you might want to frame that. You could say this has been studied before, but not in Chile. That's kind of like saying it's the 500 first paper, but this is the first one on trucking. But if you can come up with a reason why we might expect things to be different in Chile, or why we can illuminate theory better, we can explore boundary conditions because of the benefits of using data from Chile, then that becomes something that gets people excited. So same exact paper, but those first few paragraphs might be, I'll leave it at that. I think I've said what I need to say. So let me stop there. So just to conclude, I enjoyed both papers. I look forward to seeing them as they progress. And thanks for listening to me.